Good afternoon to everyone joining us today from India, and good morning to everyone who have joined us today from the Netherlands. Netherlands has always been a home to liberalism, enterprise, tolerance, and diversity. The country is not only known for its beautiful canals and top-notch museums, but also a hotspot for some of the brightest and forward-thinking entrepreneurs and creatives in Europe. The Dutch startup ecosystem is celebrated for its high degree of social and logistical connection with the rest of the world, and the increasingly mature investment climate and the extent to which Dutch startup taps the world market. Laws and legislations play a very important part in making the Dutch startup ecosystem amongst the top three startup ecosystems in Europe. Therefore, we are delighted, both the Embassy of Netherlands in India and Startup India, to have with us today Mr. Martin van 't Veld from RVO, which is the Netherlands point of entry, and Ms. Tarhat Mehis from IND, which is the Immigration and Naturalization Service, to shed light on the laws and legislation that govern the expansion of Indian startups into the Netherlands. We would request Mr. Martin if he could please present his presentation on RVO and on the Dutch startup ecosystem. He is the advisor at the Netherlands point of entry and would be the go-to person for any startup who have any questions about entering Netherlands and expanding into the Dutch market. Martin, over to you.
Thank you. Allow me to first share my screen. 1 second. Final check, is it working? Okay. So hi, I'm Martin van 't Veld. I work for the Netherlands point of entry, part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate. And I'm honored to be here on invitation and to give you some information about what I do and how I can help you. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the startup ecosystem in the Netherlands. Just the main points, why does it thrive, why would it be interesting for an Indian startup. I'm also going to focus on the startup visa, also together with Taya, who will be next. And I'll focus on the facilitators, who are really vital for as well the startup ecosystem as the startup visa. So yeah, let me start off. I think it's important to know that the Dutch startup ecosystem is a very interesting one. The Netherlands is really a trader country, and it's due to several factors that it has also been able to build a real startup ecosystem in the Netherlands. And I think it's due to the many corporates and headquarters in the Netherlands, the skill-ups and the unicorns who already made it in the Netherlands, the government who is really active in supporting, and one very important step is the connectivity. So within Europe. So the Netherlands, it's a rather small country, but it's a really great testbed and starting point if you want to scale to Europe. So that's an interesting one. And I will also focus on the startup visa, which is one of my responsibilities for the connecting with the facilitators and giving information. But let's start with the first one, the corporates. So you don't have to write them down as fast as you can. I will share the presentation. But it's interesting to have a broad overview. For example, ASML for the semiconductors in the Eindhoven region, and the European Medicine Agency, who relocated to the Netherlands, focusing on life science and health, of course, and all these different companies throughout the Netherlands who are really vital for building the startup ecosystem, because they have all this experience and they have all this business. And of course, they also connect many times to accelerators or incubators. For example, Shell works together with Rockstar to build an energy program. And that's really a great connection if you're building your startup, of course. So that's for the corporates. But the Netherlands is also really focusing on innovation. And this is due to the many universities in the Netherlands, all of them who are in the top 200 of best universities of the world. But it's also because the many startups and scale-ups already became very big, and they really are vital to this startup ecosystem. And it's interesting to highlight a few of them. So as you can see, these are a few of them. Adyen, the financial payment provider in Amsterdam, which is doing very well. And I would also like to mention Mali Payments, who just recently became a unicorn. So there's really a fintech spot in Amsterdam, if that has your interest. So that's a good place to start. Of course, Booking.com, the travel provider. MessageBird, also a very large investment last year. So they're really growing fast. They're now also focusing on video next to the text, which is very interesting, I believe. Protex, so a different focus on agriculture and food. They take the black flies and they make them into food supplements. So that's an interesting one. Takeaway.com, well, they're growing very fast, trying to take over the market. Even yesterday, there was a Twitter discussion between the CEO of Takeaway and Uber Eats, who's the better one. So this is interesting, this competition and what's happening there. And of course, Picnic, also very well funded, and it's really they raised 250 million in funding last year, and they have the online supermarkets, and they're really challenging this market. And so all these skill ups and the unicorns, they really built on this startup ecosystem. They're part of it, and which is interesting. And the next one would be the government and how they actively support startups and how they cut the red tape and how they try to help you move forward. I think one of the main attractions of the Netherlands is that we are really trying to cut this red tape for you and to be transparent about what are the possibilities and how can we help. Who you see now is the Prince. He's the brother of the King of the Netherlands. And he's actually in the forefront of building the startup and skill ecosystem in the Netherlands for several years. And what they do is actually they build all these programs. They locate what's not working, what does the startup ecosystem need in the form of capital or talent. For example, the startup visa. And how can we help these startups and skill ups to grow even further and grow even faster. For example, they have, well, the startup visa was designed together with them, of course. And they also now have the RISE program for skill ups who are looking for funding of 10 million and more, because they're really connecting them to the international ecosystem and giving them advice and connecting them to VCs, because they saw that they need help in that sense. And they also focus on things like diversity with a program called Fund Rights. It was noticed that VCs weren't investing as much in female founders as they were in male founders. And they are looking at this point and really saying you have to underline this and make sure that there's more funding also for female founders and have focus on this. So the next one would be the connectedness of the Netherlands. I think this is a very interesting one because of, well, first of all, we're not number one. That's an interesting one. Next, let's look at the Netherlands. So basically, it's 70 million people. Well, that's a little bit more than an Indian city, so it's rather a small country. However, it has so many points that make it interesting. And if we look at the bigger picture, it's really a great starting point if you want to scale to Europe, because to the right next to it is Germany. Below is Belgium and France, and to the left is the UK. So, and these are the three largest economies, of course, in Europe. So it's vital to be in the middle of that in a logistical hub with so many folks on innovation that can really be vital to your startup to start. It's a really good place to start. It's something I really get back from many startups too. But also, if you look within the country, everything's very close by. It's almost an hour and a half every hub you're now seeing to get there, mostly much faster. But they all have these different focuses. So if you're looking to relocate or scale to the Netherlands, you can really look into what is your focus. Are you focusing on port technology, logistics? Maybe you should go to Rotterdam. If you're focusing on fintech, maybe you should focus on Amsterdam. Are you more on a high-tech level? So you should look into the university cities like Twente, Eindhoven, Delft, and agriculture, food, Wageningen. So it really depends. And you would still be close by to, for example, Amsterdam, which of course has a very thriving ecosystem. So this is really what makes us #1 as a connected country, not only within the country, but also outside of the country, connecting to the international world. And that gets me to the Dutch startup visa. So Taya will really get into that as part of the immigration office. But let me just give you the pitch of the startup visa. It's really a fast-track program for innovative startups. So the main reason it's designed is to help you to move forward. We understand that you have a business and that you have a startup and you have to move fast. You need capital, you need talent, you need all these things. So we really understand that. And that's why this visa, actually residency permit, was designed. And the main thing is, first of all, you need to have your business plan or your pitch deck, and you need to pitch it to a recognized facilitator. So these facilitators are really recognized by the government, by us, but they are market parties many times. So market parties, universities, regional development agencies. And why they are recognized as a facilitator and can provide support for the startup visa is because they are within the market. So they can actually guide you in a year to really get you to grow your startup even faster. Because when you're coming from abroad, it's hard to connect to another startup ecosystem. And these people, they can really help you. These organizations are really vested into the startup ecosystem and can guide you, can introduce you to network, can give workshops, all these different things. And it really depends also on what you need. And there's 40 of these organizations. So I always say, look at them, see which one would connect, pitch to them, and you can move forward from that. That's the basics. So there are details to it, but that's the basic on how to get started. And they focus for a bit on this. So I made a little word cloud. And as you can see, they're mainly tech focused, but also on things like health, cybersecurity, food, agriculture, all these high tech, gaming, smart city, also impact. So these are really the focus. So it's always about innovation if we're talking about the startup visa. And then we have a little bit of the details. So I'll just walk through it real quickly, but Tarja can get into this deeper. So it's basically really about having that innovative idea and you being part of that as an entrepreneur. You need some sufficient means. And of course, you need an agreement with the startup visa facilitator. How are they going to help you? Who will help you? Who's the coach? What's your focus? So these things. And you need to be registered. What their possibilities as long as you're a facilitator, and it's family friendly. And you can actually, after 1 year, you can extend to the self-employed visa as long as your facilitator is thinks you're successful and you follow their guidance. That's a very important one. And I want to open it up. I know some of you already found me on LinkedIn, but we're really open. So you can connect to us or to me or to my team. And if I feel there's a match between you and a facilitator, I can connect you to a facilitator. Or you can connect yourself, of course, if you feel that works better for you. And these are the facilitators. So many of them, I can highlight a few. For example, you have the Next Web, who are really a blog and a conference, but they also have spaces in Amsterdam, and they're really tech focused if you're looking to scale. If you look at Collider, if you're in marketing or advertising, they're really focused on that. They're also in London. There's a really focused accelerator on this who also invest. Of course, you have Antler, a really international accelerator, and they're more of a team building startup, venture builder. So you can join as one person with a special talent. Maybe you're really good in a certain technology, or you're an excellent business developer, and you can build a team within the program. Brightlands, focusing on chemicals in Limburg. course, yes, Delft, the Delft University is rather famous. They focus on medical technology, innovation, always innovation, high tech. So many different of these, and it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for gaming, you have Inditopia and the Dutch Game Garden. If you're looking for health, you have Health Inc. And Health Valley. And if you're looking for impact, there's Impact Hub who can really help you. So it really depends, and really you can really reach out to us if you want some more information on that. And this is my information, and I'm sure it will be shared later on. But I'm really happy to connect and to answer all of your questions fully. So I'm now going to stop sharing my screen.
And your education was extremely, or it helped a lot of you to expand the Dutch speakers scene, which is the image services, the Netherlands kindly ask you to kindly and log out in the Netherlands.
Your voice is breaking a bit, Katja. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I audible?
Tarja, I think that you can present.
Okay. Now, sometimes technology lets us down. We can see. I'm Tarja Meijs. I'm from the Immigration Office in the Netherlands. I'm a policy advisor at the Immigration Office, and my main focus is on work-related migration. So also the startup visa is one of the policies that I advise about. So thank you, Martin, for your great presentation about the startup ecosystem in the Netherlands. As Martin already explained, I will elaborate a little bit more about the residence permit, so the startup visa, and all the requirements for the startup visa. First of all, if you want to obtain a residence permit in the Netherlands, you have to meet general conditions that are conditions like you have to have a valid passport, and you have to sign a declaration that you don't have a criminal record, and that kind of general conditions. But for the startup visa, there are also additional conditions that you have to meet. Martin already explained a bit about it. First of all, you need to have a collaboration with a reliable and experienced facilitator, as Martin already mentioned. So this facilitator is a business mentor, and he can help you with support depending on the specific needs that you need. Furthermore, the product or the service that you want to the product or the service that you want to that you want to exploitate in the Netherlands, it needs to be innovative. So innovative means the product or service is new to the Netherlands, or it involves a new technology for production, distribution, or marketing, or it involves an innovative organizational procedure or method. Furthermore, you need to have a step-by-step plan. And this means you have to explain in this step-by-step plan how you want to move from idea to business. So you have to explain your role in the startup, the idea you have for the startup and the product, what it makes that it is innovative, and the steps the startup entrepreneur plans to take within the first year to transform the idea to the business. Furthermore, you have to register in the trade register of the Chamber of Commerce. This is only required if it's possible, because if you're still abroad, it may not be possible to register. So if you're already in the Netherlands and it is possible, you can register through the trade register of the Chamber of Commerce. If it's not possible, you can explain, and your facilitator can explain that you will register as soon as possible. Furthermore, you need to have sufficient financial means. This means you have to have these sufficient financial means during the validity of your residence permit, so that the residence permit is valid for 1 year. And this means around 12 times 1,300 euros, a little bit less. You need to prove this with either a bank statement or another legal person. For example, the facilitator. He may fund your stay by providing financial resources. Furthermore, there are additional conditions for the facilitator. The facilitator needs to be experienced in guiding innovative startups. The facilitator needs to be financially sound. He may not have a majority of interest in a startup company, and he may not be a family member up to the 3rd degree of the startup entrepreneur. And he has to have a deputy within the organization. So that means he has to have like a backup in the organization. The next slide, please. Yes. Now, I will elaborate a little bit more about the provisional residence permit. This is called the MVV in Dutch. If you're still in your country of residence, you need an MVV to travel to the Netherlands. And you can apply for your startup residence permit at the Dutch embassy. And the Dutch embassy will forward your application to the IND in the Netherlands, and they will make a decision on your application. And if your application is granted, you will get an MVV, so provisional residence permit, that allows you to travel to the Netherlands. And you can collect that at the embassy of the Netherlands in your country of residence. I think this was already explained, but the startup residence permit is valid for 1 year, and the application costs are 342 euros. And the official decision time, it takes 90 days. That's according to the law, but we aim to do it faster, and we aim to do it in 7 weeks. But there is a legal time frame of 90 days that you will get your official decision. Furthermore, you can also, there's also a possibility to take your family members to the Netherlands if you get a residence permit as a startup visa. And your family members are allowed to work freely without a work permit in the Netherlands. So this is also a positive contribution to your residence permit as a startup, that your family members can work freely. And then if you were granted your residence permit for a startup, after 1 year, you can extend your permit on the basis of the self-employment scheme. The self-employment scheme focuses on a scoring system. But if you have a positive declaration from your facilitator, you can get an extension for the self-employment scheme. And this extension has a validity of 2 years. And now I will explain a little bit more about the organizations involved. First of all, you have the Dutch representation or the embassy in your country of residence. As I already explained, if you need an MVV, so a provisional residence permit, you can submit your application at the Dutch embassy. and the embassy will send your application to the IND. But if you, in case of a startup residence permit, you can come to the Netherlands also on a short stay visa, because you have to pitch or present your idea of your startup business at a facilitator. And if you are already in the Netherlands on a short stay visa, you can also submit your application directly at the IND, or your facilitator can submit the application online. In case you are already in the Netherlands on a short time visa, you don't need a provisional residence permit. So you don't need to go to the embassy to collect this MVV. In that case, you will just get your residence permit in the Netherlands, and you can collect it in the Netherlands. Now, of course, there is the Immigration and Naturalization Service. We will handle your application, and we will see if all conditions are met, and if all documents are there. And if that's the case, we will transfer to RVO and ask for an advice at RVO, because they will advise on the innovativeness of your company, on the facilitator, on the step-by-step plan, and if you are registered at the Chamber of Commerce. And then the RVO will send an advice to the IND and they will give a positive or a negative advice. If it's a positive advice, the IND will make the ultimate decision and grant you a residence permit. As I already explained, so RVO, that's the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, they have a big role in this procedure, because they have a lot more knowledge on the economic and the ecosystem, and they have an active role in advising the IND on the innovativeness of the company. Furthermore, we have expat centers in the Netherlands. They can assist you with your application, and you can also collect your residence permit at the expat center, and they can also assist you with municipal registration once your residence permit has been granted. And then after the application, so if your residence permit is granted, you can collect your residence permit at one of the offices of the IND or at the expat center, and you have to register at the municipality. Furthermore, you have to undergo a TB, a tuberculosis test, within 3 months, I think, after your residence permit is granted. You have to get health insurance, and of course, with your residence permit, you have a right to work for the startup business as a self-employed person. If you want to work under contract of another business, you have to get a work permit. So you can only work as a self-employed person at your startup business. And then I have some do's and don'ts, maybe, or just some frequently asked questions. First, get yourself informed through all the websites, through RVO. They have a lot of knowledge, as Martin already explained. You can also search the website of the IND or get in contact with the expat centers. And furthermore, I want to elaborate on some frequently asked questions that we get at the IND. First, it's the Dutch bank account, because you have to prove that you have sufficient financial means. And you have to prove this through a bank statement. And this bank statement has to be through a Dutch bank account. But if you don't have a residence permit yet and a social security number, you cannot open a Dutch bank account yet, but there are some other possibilities. For instance, an authorized person can open an account for you connected to a PO box. A third party, you can make use of a third party account from a Dutch notary, or if your facilitator or another person is helping you in the finances, you can also transfer your financial resources through that person. So there are some other options. So this can be a difficulty, but there are some options, and you can always ask at the IND for the possibilities. Furthermore, let me see. I also, if you want to travel to the Netherlands before you apply for a residence permit, you can travel on a business visa to the Netherlands. Just explain at the embassy that you will do this in order to obtain your residence permit later. And another frequently asked question, just if you want to collaborate with a facilitator that is not yet approved by the RVO, just get in contact with the RVO first to see if this facilitator may have enough experience just to make it more successful that your application will be granted. That was it, I think. Yes. Thank you for having me today. I will answer some questions at the Q&A later.
Thank Tarika.
No, you're still, your voice is still breaking a bit.
Ask Binu to take Q&A round now.
Thank you, Taya, for the presentation. I hope my voice is audible.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so thank you both Martin and Taya for your presentation. It's extremely helpful for our startup ecosystem to not only understand the process of applying and moving towards Netherlands and working with different business partners, but also the specifics of how it is that you resolve certain issues and what are the nitty-gritties of it. So we'll just move on to the Q&A session or part of the session. And at first, I'd like to ask Martin a few questions. So my first question for you, Martin, will be, how is it that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the facilitation landscape for international startups who are hoping to expand their business in Netherlands?
I think it's still very, very good option to go to the Netherlands, even in the COVID crisis. First of all, on the level of a startup visa, so the one thing is you can't really travel to the Netherlands on a business visa and get to know them. So that is happening now digital. But once you request a startup visa, you can still travel to the Netherlands, still following the COVID, of course, quarantine and all these things that you need to do. But as for opportunities, I think they're still very much okay. So maybe the focus has changed a little bit. But you can still connect to the facilitators. They're still very interested to know about you, to see how you can help. If we're talking about funding, for example, last year was another record in the Netherlands with funding of startups and scale-ups. So that's not something that's happening right now going very wrong. So that's still going very well. So it's still open, and they're still open for business and for connection and for matching. So if you're interested, this is still a good time to look for Netherlands. Oh, you're on mute, Pino.
Yeah, thank you for answering that, Martin. The second question that was asked by a lot of startups and people who wanted to move their startups to the Netherlands was, the gender diversity is closely connected with the Dutch technology scene. Could you please highlight any laws or legislatures that support international women founders who want to set up their businesses in the Netherlands?
Sure. Well, laws and legislation is, of course, it's equal. And so there are no special laws for this. I would like to highlight some initiatives that are very interesting. As I mentioned before, there is a focus on female founders. There are more male founders in the Netherlands than female founders. However, we know about this and we focus on this and we try to change it. For example, with the fund right initiatives. So many of the VCs in the Netherlands have actually signed this document to fund female founders and to focus on this, because there was only a certain percentage funded with them. Still, of course, as long as it's a good idea, but that's really an interesting thing that's happening right now, and it's really helping on moving forward. Also, in Amsterdam, there's now an initiative also focusing on female founders, helping them bringing out the message. It's a RISE program. It's funded from the government of Amsterdam or the municipality of Amsterdam. So that's a very interesting one. And also, well, I would say it's something that people talk about, and I think they know it's interesting, and it's something that's very important. And within the startups ecosystem, this is something that people are talking about and focusing on. So that's more on a soft level. And also you have these organizations like Hearst, of course, from the US, from Cosmopolitan and these magazines. They also have a lab in the Netherlands focusing on female founders. In the Eindhoven region, famous for high tech, they also focus on AI students and professors with a different background. So all these different initiatives are all focused on supporting female founders and strengthening the ecosystem in this sense.
Okay, thanks, Martin. It's great to know that it's not just in the legal framework, it's also that support is being provided through different programs, which will give them different opportunities to go ahead and set up more ventures. Like a key question which a lot of startups do have is, how do international startups raise funding in the Netherlands? And we have seen that even during the COVID-19 crisis, the Dutch startup ecosystem has shown a very steady growth at 6% to 10,000 plus startups. But still less than 2% of these tech startups get to scale up to the phase of $10 million in funding. Could you please explain to us what are the challenges faced by international startups and what are the potential reasons behind this when they raise funding in the Netherlands?
Yeah, so I think the Netherlands is a really interesting ecosystem, and it's really building up and it's really growing. So every year there's more funding and there are more things happening, but still, of course, it's not Silicon Valley, and it's a fairly small country. So that's the reason that it's not yet at that level. But again, we are very aware of that. So there's also a program focusing on these startups who are looking to scale. And now they're being helped to scale and to find this funding of 10 million plus. So, and well, if you look at that, so that's really, I think that's really the way the Dutch like to look at this. So there's an issue, and where is it? Is it capital, talent, what's happening, and focus on it and try to resolve it. Also, how are you going to attract the pension funds, which are very large in the Netherlands, of course. And also there's different government initiatives to fund these kinds of organizations. And I think that's really vital for the startup ecosystem that's building to getting more funding on that level. So that might be, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Martin. I think it's very helpful to know in these times, how is it that specific programs are going to help with funding also, because while a lot of it is dependent on outside factors, support being provided is essential to startups. And on further along those lines, we just wanted to ask you, are there any particular sectors that are priority sectors for IND or RVO, like deep tech, agri tech, clean tech, or something else?
So in the end, IND and RVO, I think the nice thing about the Startup Visa program is that in a sense, of course, we are on top of it, but in a sense, it's really the market that decides what's interesting. And the market focuses on tech, on impact, on health, on life sciences, food and agriculture, high tech, quantum technology, AI. So we all know about these. So that's one. It's really about the market and about these facilitators, what they focus on. But still, the government, of course, has a focus on several technologies. So, for example, some key technologies, as they're called, and this is really focused on these high-tech technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum and nanotechnology, life science. So this is really on the high-tech level, which is the government is interested in, and they just funded a program for quantum technology with 650 million. So you can understand that this is an important one in the Netherlands, for example. It's always interesting to know what the people who are behind this, what they're looking about. I already have some LinkedIn invites and saw somebody who is interested in nanotechnology. Well, that would be interesting to connect, but let me know, because there's also focus on impact, for example, on sustainability. So that's a different side from high tech. Well, could combine. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Martin. Like, it generally helps a lot when we know about these specific information, because then sector specific startups also know how to reach out to it. Taya, I just had a few questions for you also. And I'd like to start off by talking about how the IND and RVO website mentioned that startups should work alongside facilitator. And we also saw you discuss the role of facilitators, how to identify facilitators. We also want to understand who can act as a facilitator. What does an agreement with a facilitator mean, and how does a facilitator have any, and does the facilitator have any legal obligations to the startup?
Yes, of course. Yeah, first of all, there are already a lot of facilitators that Martin mentioned that are connected to the RVO. It was also in his presentation, this elaborate companies or facilitators that you can connect to, or even RVO can connect them to you. But furthermore, also other companies can act as a facilitator, but they have to be experienced. So they have to be experienced in giving guidance to a startup. So if you have another company or another like maybe an business angel or other companies that want to help you, please contact RVO in advance before your application, because they can already see if it can be a successful facilitator. And the facilitator is actually like, how do I explain? During the process of your residence permit, if you apply for residence permit, the IND asks for advice at RVO, and RVO also takes in the role of the facilitator in their advice. So during the application for your residence permit, the RVO will assess if the facilitator is experienced and reliable. So yeah, I want to advise, if you have another facilitator that is not yet connected to the RVO, just please contact the RVO to see what the success chances are if you connect with this facilitator.
Thank you so much, Taya. It also clears up a lot of questions around how do you connect and what are the specific pathways that you can follow. Along the same lines, we wanted to ask you, what is the duration of the starter permit and what are the possibilities for an extension on it?
Yes, of course. As already mentioned, the residence permit of the startup visa is valid for 1 year. And after that year, you can extend to the self-employment scheme. And if you're a facilitator that you were collaborating with during your startup residence permit, you can sorry, I got a call. If the facilitator gives a positive review on your business, that means that you can get it's an easier. How do I explain? For the self-employment scheme, this means you can get an easier. Let me go back. For the self-employment scheme, you have to oblige to a certain score system, and the score system sees on different things such as your personal experience, your business plan, and the added value you have to the Netherlands. But if your facilitator gives you a positive review, you already get points for this scoring system. So it's easier to get your extension for the self-employment scheme. Martin, do I explain this correctly? Do you have anything else to add, maybe? This is also something that RVO assesses in the application during the procedure.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. Basically, there are two entrepreneur visa, self-employed and startup visa. And self-employed is really for the most of the time the more the experienced entrepreneur, where they have some funding, some investment, have a lot of experience. So basically for that, and the startup residency permit is really designed for people who really have that great innovative idea and they really want to scale, but they need some guidance. So that's really the difference. And once you follow the startup residency permit, you can just go into the self-employed permit, basically, if the facilitator is okay with that. Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Taya, for your answer, and Martin for substantiating to it further. And we just have one final now question for you, Taya. When can a startup apply for residence permit based on the self-employment scheme? And I think this becomes important for startups, especially like startups from India who are want to move towards Netherlands. And could you please explain the self-employment scheme further?
Yeah. So if you already had a residence permit based on startup visa, as explained, if the facilitator approves, you can get an extension on the self-employment scheme. That extension has a validity of 2 years. And after 2 years, you can extend again on the self-employment scheme, but then you have to apply to all the conditions that are for the self-employment scheme, and you have to apply you have to meet conditions like your sufficient means of income, and I don't think RVO gives another advice in this procedure. Is that correct, Martin? I think only IND uses this second extension, right?
No, well,
IND
just they are connected to
Yeah?
RVO because we're really
Okay.
connected to the system. Yeah, but basically it's a process.
The self-employment scheme, it's a scoring system. So there are three points, like your personal experience, the business plan, and the added value for the Netherlands. And you can score 100 points on each of these categories, and you have to at least score 90 points with a minimum of 30 points for each part. And if you don't score 30 points in one part, you have to score 45 points on the other parts, I think. But we can forward it. It's an elaborate criteria list and how you can score points. We can forward it if that will make it more easier to understand, because it's difficult to explain in detail.
Thank you, Taya. That actually does explain it well, especially because it lays out the specifics for how you would need to tackle each section of it. Thank you so much, Taya and Martin, for your time, for your presentations, and for answering all our questions so patiently. These are essential questions which help our startups understand how to transition to a new market. We'd also like to thank the Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands in India for their unwavering support. We request Ms. Paulina now to kindly give her vote of thanks and conclude the session.
Thank you very much, Binil. And thanks to Kavya. I hope that you are listening. It is a great pleasure to be a part of this mentorship program that aims to close the awareness gap on the available opportunities and the know-how on scaling up in the Dutch market. We all know that in coming years, startups will bring disruption solutions and change the way we live, we consume, and we communicate. So looking forward, it is very important that the startup ecosystems are well integrated to connect startups and other stakeholders with each other. For that, together with my colleague Ravlin and our embassy network spread around the country, with consulates general in Bengaluru and Mumbai, with our honorary consulates and the Netherlands business support offices, we are supporting startups from both countries and guiding them through ecosystems of India and the Netherlands. If you have any queries with regard to the same, you can contact Ravlin or me, and we will help you further with that. Today's session was about laws and regulations in the Netherlands with focus on startup visa and residence permit. I think both our guest speakers made it clear that the Netherlands has a positive work culture and competitive fiscal and international business climate, and offers ease of doing business and many points of entry, as it's Europe's most connected economy, and also in the world of what we understood from Martin. I would like to thank Mr. Martin van het Held for his presentation about the Startup Visa Program. I noted down 3 takeaways from his speech that the Netherlands is a great starting point for scaling up to Europe, with facilitators based around the country and across the sectors. Facilitators are vital for your startup visa program, so partner up with recognized ones, and RVO can help you with that. And make sure that you have your innovative idea explained in a business plan. I would also like to thank Mrs. Tarja Mais. Likewise, I think that the 3 takeaways from her presentations are make sure that you check whether you fulfill all the conditions for the startup visa before you apply. There are different organizations involved in the process, so check well which ones apply to your situation, and they can help you further. And that there are plenty of information available. You just have to ask and prepare yourself well. And last but not least, I would like to thank Startup India for organizing and moderating this session. The bilateral partnership with Startup India and the different programs that we work together on are important building blocks to ensure we raise awareness of the opportunities in both ecosystems. In fact, I would like to highlight the Indo-Dutch Startup Link platform that was launched for Indian and Dutch startups that are exploring each other's ecosystems. This platform offers access to key information, relevant networks, pilot opportunities, and navigators for their respective startup ecosystems. So I invite you to have a look at this platform, and I believe that the link will be shared after this session. And yeah, that would be it from my side. Thank you very much for participating. Stay tuned for the chapter 3 session of the Indo-Dutch talks. That will be on building Dutch internationalization strategies and leveraging Enable Connects. And it will take place somewhere in May. So yeah, thanks very much. Stay safe and follow the further information.